Derek Adams of Time Out called this movie a hammed-up version of the old chestnut about the ventriloquist who is taken over by his dummy. New York Times critic Vincent Canby felt it was neither eerie nor effective. And Letterboxd user Howling Man said maybe I just like it because I was raised with media telling me to be spooked of talking dolls, like Twilight Zone or Goosebumps told me. Just something insidious about ventriloquism. On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we decide the fate of magic.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, starfighters.
Yeah, greetings, you bunch of starfuckers.
Whoa, easy there, Fats.
Oh, was that Fats? Is yours also named Fats?
Ventriloquy, something that doesn't work on podcasts. Welcome to Ruined Childhood.
You know, Dan, I had a radio show in college, and on that show, I had a sidekick. Did you know about this?
It sounds vaguely familiar.
I had a sidekick named Montgomery Sniffles, and he was a mute clown. And I actually had a guy wearing this old, dirty clown suit I found on eBay and not say a word. And he was just there with me. And it was so funny to me. And I didn't care what anybody else thought about it. So I think that's the same thing as doing like a ventriloquist act on a podcast that's audio only.
Yeah. So anyway, it's Ruined Childhood.
So anyway,
yeah. No. We're talking about the movie Magic.
Don't you so anyway?
We're talking
me?
about the movie Magic. Yeah. No, I don't know what to do with that, John. I don't. You had a sidekick on a radio show that was did you say a mute clown?
Yeah.
Correct? And you actually had someone there with you wearing a clown costume when you did the radio show.
Yes.
So that person just sat there and the audience was not necessarily aware of them other than you're referencing them.
Yes.
But it could have there could have just as well been nobody there.
Absolutely.
I'm grasping this. Okay.
Yeah, right. So Dan, here's the thing. Like, why do it with nobody actually there? How is that funny? It's only funny, and I don't care if it's only funny to me. It's only funny if there's actually somebody there. And then if somebody like asks the people at the radio station, is there actually a clown there? They could be like, yeah. It's just a guy sitting there next to him.
You know what?
In a dirty used clown suit.
I see your point.
Ooh, used clown suit. That's disgusting.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things wrong. I don't know if eBay.
It's the opposite of cellar
like,
door.
I'm sorry, I don't see that on eBay. That's more of like a Craigslist thing. And
Dan, this was 2001.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would make so
yeah.
eBay did not have the high watermark that it does today.
It was kind of anything goes.
It was the Wild West of the internet back then.
It really was. This was, I think, pre-Craigslist.
2001. Oh yeah, maybe I'm like trying to think of when I became aware of Craigslist and then just kind of subtract 5 years. So it's like, when did I become aware of something? All right, so it was probably around for like 5 years before that.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, yes, as you were saying, this is Ruined Childhoods. You are Dan, I am John, so on and so forth. We're talking about a movie on this episode from 1978, directed by Sir Richard Attenborough, Magic. And Dan, was this your first time seeing this?
Yes. Was it yours?
This was my first time actually even hearing about this movie.
Which, and I mean, it wasn't the first time I had heard of it because I had seen it in various, like running through different streaming services and seeing it. And like, I think I'd been aware of it, but I wasn't aware of it enough to even know that it was directed by Academy Award winning director of Gandhi, Sir Richard Attenborough.
It's definitely somebody with a pretty strong track record, and kind of this one that just, I don't know, like the more I was reading about it, the more I was like, oh yeah, people knew about this. And I think that it was one of those movies that for people, in the, I guess you could probably say like, 8 to 15-year-old range in 1978, this was probably I don't know, it seems like a memorable movie for them. I just from hearing about what people have how people reacted to it, is that it was one that like, kids would think, oh, okay, that's cool, a ventriloquist movie, and then kind of being mortified by it.
Yeah, I mean, it reminded me of some other movies, and we'll get into it more after the synopsis, just because it'll make sense more. But it did, and of course, that age range that you said, that kind of tween.
I don't know why I said that age range. Yeah, tween
boy.
Yeah,
I mean, spoiler alert: Ann-Margaret shows her nipple.
That's true.
Yes, so. And so naturally, but
snap out of it, Dan.
It's a memorable moment in the movie. There are lots of memorable moments in this movie, though, and I'm really surprised that I hadn't heard of it sooner. That it doesn't have more of a cult following. It is very much this is a cult movie.
Well, I think that this is one of those movies that, like, there's podcasts like the Blank Check podcast where they kind of go through a director's entire filmography beat by beat. And I feel like this is one where they would get to that and it would kind of be one of the more interesting episodes, because it is just like why is this not as memorable as maybe some of Richard Attenborough's other films? I mean, he was certainly a very well-known director with A Bridge Too Far. I guess this was one of his earlier ones before like really picking up. But like you said, Gandhi, A Chorus Line. I loved his film Chaplin with Robert Downey Jr. I don't know. I feel like there was just a lot that this should have stood out for, and I don't know. I think that maybe because it was a horror movie.
It's such an interesting movie because it's a horror movie. It's a comedy. It's got so much there's a lot there. To me, it's really interesting because you have, Sir Richard Attenborough, who, in his acting career, he plays a primary role in The Great Escape, for example.
Yeah.
Later in his career is Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the last name is Hammond. I almost said Reggie Hammond, but no, that's Eddie Murphy in 48 Hours.
Yes.
Miracle on 34th Street. So
yeah.
Accomplished, and he won the Academy Award for Gandhi, within like 5 years later. So, yeah. But yet this movie is so weird.
Also, okay, so you think about a movie like Gandhi, and when I think about Gandhi, I think of it as being very like vast and complete and complex, and I think that there's a lot of elements of Gandhi that put it up there in a different light, whereas this movie is very enclosed. You're only with a few characters. You're mostly in an isolated place physically or emotionally, and like when he's in like a crowded nightclub, the sweat pouring off of his face. It's a very intimate look. And I mean, the movie that I think this is closest to. Oh, are you going to say what I'm about to say?
I'm so excited to find out.
Well, I mean, he was very Rupert Pupkin-y, King of Comedy.
Yeah, which De Niro was considered for the role.
Oh, okay. What did you think I was going to say?
Well, no, a movie that's a derivative of that. Well, I actually didn't think you were going to say it because it made me think of Joker, which by extension is thinking about King of Comedy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it totally acknowledged, but Joker kind of being in thinking of how does this movie play, in 2022, that's kind of the closest connection I could find to it in recent memory.
Oh, yeah, of course. But that really is just King of Comedy.
Right.
But anyway.
Yes.
So why don't I give a little synopsis, because this is one where I'd be surprised if very many of the listeners have seen this one. It certainly isn't on the top of most people's lists, probably. But anyway,
probably.
Here's what I put together for this one. I didn't want to give away too much because now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, do I want to even say all of these things that I say, or do I want to just give like more of like a 1 or 2 sentence synopsis? I'm just going to. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read up until the point where things get crazy. And I'm going to essentially just be like, and that's where things get crazy.
Yes, I think that's the right decision. Go for it.
Though his temper is small, Corky's talents are quite vast. However, they come at a cost. Having grown up very much in the background of other people's lives, Corky studied under a magician named Merlin, who believes that Corky is the next great illusionist. However, when Corky first tries out a card trick at an open mic night, he gets booed until he raves against the crowd. But he manages to burst onto the nightclub scene once he incorporates his dummy Fats. Along with Fats, Corky woos his audiences, especially his new agent, Ben Green. Ben believes in Corky's talents, but Corky's temper prohibits him from getting a show at NBC. But it's Corky's fault. He refuses to take a psych evaluation. In an effort to clear his head, Corky takes a cab to where he grew up and notices that his old high school crush's house has a room for rent. After giving the cabbie money to not tell anyone he's out there, Corky rents the room and reunites with Peggy. The two reminisce, and she is quite taken by his act with Fats. He shows Peggy some card tricks and things get quite intense. They end up sleeping together, which enrages Fats. That's right, there's something off about Fats, and that's where things get crazy.
Oh, yeah. Woo.
So this movie is about dissociative identity disorder.
Yes.
That's something that we certainly should be talking about. It's about this person who is troubled using this ventriloquist dummy to act out this other side of himself and be this part of him that's kind of overtaking him. So things get crazy.
Yeah. And, it's a couple other movies that popped into my mind. And, I don't want to talk about a lot of the scenes because I don't want to ruin them for people who haven't seen the movie, because it's really something I had moments where I was just like jaw dropped. And there are moments I think are intentionally very effective. And then there are moments that I think are very unintentionally hilarious. And it made me think. So it made me think of that aspect of King of Comedy, and and then by extension, it's like third cousin twice removed Joker. But also like Little Shop of Horrors, because Fats, like in Little Shop of Horrors, Seymour doesn't find success or love until he makes a deal with Audrey too, and starts feeding it humans. So I
specifically humans that he wants out of the picture.
Right. Yeah. So it made me think, especially, the scene with Duke and Margaret's character's husband.
Yeah. Just real quick, Anthony Hopkins plays Corky and Margaret plays Peggy. We have Burgess Meredith as Ben Green, Ed Lautner as Duke. And I guess you can say Anthony Hopkins also as Fats.
Which I thought was great. At first, I wasn't sure if Anthony Hopkins was also doing the voice of Fats. And you can hear it, but I thought that was great. The other movie it brought to mind was Fight Club.
Okay.
Dissociative, personality disorder, that whole idea. But yeah, it gave me strong Little Shop vibes also, because when especially the scene when Corky talks about like running away with I can't remember
Peggy?
Peggy, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Talked about running away with Peggy and not taking Fats, and that's when things get really crazy. I mean, when do things get crazy? Things just keep getting crazier and crazier. Burgess Meredith is just wonderful in this.
Also, his character's name is Ben Green. You have to imagine they were hoping to cast someone perhaps more Jewish.
Perhaps.
Just it's an agent. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I it's funny though, because for a while I couldn't tell, like, if that was just his last name, because when Anthony Hopkins says it, he says, "Oh, that's Ben Green, that's Ben Green." And like, is it gangrene? What?
Well, and this leads me to my biggest question about this movie. Why does Anthony Hopkins talk like that if he's from like upstate New York?
They explain it. There's just one moment where the line is, and I'm quoting, "His father was a limey."
So what?
And they moved. He grew up with a father who had a British accent, and they moved. Yeah, look, I
know plenty of people who have like a parent who's British or like has an accent, and they'd have no accent.
Well, okay. Maybe, I mean, look, that's something which, and maybe there's more in the novel, because this was adapted by William Goldman from his novel. William Goldman, who you would know from The Princess Bride.
Princess Bride, yeah. All the President's Men.
All the President's Men, also adapted Misery, Stand By Me.
Oh, right.
Yeah, William Goldman. A Marathon Man was another one of his.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, William Goldman, no slouch. And so I imagine there's more background, and then you get some background, and they have the flashbacks to his childhood.
Right.
Are so interestingly done. Like, the style of this, what I love about it is going back to, like, when you think of Richard Attenborough and you think of movies like Gandhi or Chaplin, you think of these big sprawling epics, life stories of these people. And as you said, magic is not just so much more intimate, but it's less like David Lean, like Lawrence of Arabia. Like, I think of Gandhi, I think of the double VHS cassette, which I mean, that meant, like, that was serious. If it was a double VHS, like, this was not like some silly comedy. This was a movie to be taken seriously. Yes. So I think of Richard Attenborough, and then this movie has all these weird choices. Those flashbacks that have that, like, they're shot with that, I don't know, that there's just that bit of, I don't know, light. I don't know what you would call it, but like that filter where there's just like this extra like light. And it's implying flashback, I know.
Okay.
But
so the way that it's done is that this is during his like taxi cab ride through his past, and he goes to like his childhood home, and he's telling the cab driver like, like, oh, I grew up here and everything. And what you see from like what he's seeing is his experience growing up there, just in a moment of like him whittling on like the porch, which I believe implies that he built Fats.
Yes.
Yeah. And because one thing that I read, and I didn't remember this in the movie, said that Merlin gave him Fats. And I was like, but didn't he whittle him? Anyway.
I'm pretty sure he made Fats.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure he made Fats.
Right. So it shows him whittling, and then there's a thing where he's like at his high school, and it shows him there and everything. And then I don't know.
But he's just like he's an awkward kid. You can tell that, and he's less, as they show his brother like playing catch with their father, and clearly the brother is favored and is the more athletic one, and he's just a little weird kid who's whittling a dummy. But they give you a little bit. I think I would have liked a little more of that, though I don't know, because I just like those hints that his childhood wasn't great, and that he was that kind of kid that no one really understood. Right.
Which is kind of like, troubled person in a movie 101. And you started talking about the way that it's shot and the choices that Attenborough made in filming this. And I feel like the things that stood out to me were like those shots where it would just show like Fats sitting in a chair with like dramatic lighting, and you feel really uncomfortable.
Yes.
Because you feel like this dummy is alive and like judging.
You're
and, like,
waiting
thinking.
for it. You're waiting for the slightest move as you're just getting, it's like the shot when they're having sex and you see Fats sitting in the chair, and you're just like waiting for the slightest turn of his head and on the edge of your seat. And also sound is used incredibly well to build tension. And like there's one scene where there's this clock in the background, like grandfather's clock, and then crickets in another scene, just like
the clock is when Corky is doing this card trick with Peggy and concentrating so hard to get it right, and it's a very I guess non-traditional trick where it's just like, how could this possibly be? It's one of those things where you're just like, that's impossible. But the clock ticking where he's trying to where she's trying to like send him through like telepathy, the card that she picked or whatever.
Well,
and he's like,
go ahead.
She's going along with it, but this is after he has like yelled at her to like,
because she's having fun harder at the beginning. She's just like, oh, this is fun, this is cute, this is an interesting date that's happening, and he's just like, shut the fuck up and focus.
Yeah, exactly. It's very intense. And you just hear like the clock ticking, and it's like, oh my God. So the cinematography, the sound design, extremely effective. And I think that what hurts this movie is the silliness of the ventriloquist dummy in the moments where things turn into a horror movie. And it really doesn't like match up a little. It's like a little jarring in some ways. And I don't know.
For me, and maybe it's just like the mood I was in when I watched it. I watched it in 2 sittings, but I watched the point where things get bonkers. Like I watched that all in 1 sitting.
Okay.
And I appreciated it for the absurdity. I felt that everything throughout the movie was just a little bit over the top. And I thought Hopkins did an amazing job of selling it.
Yeah.
I mean, the scene, so like the scene we were just talking about, there's the scene where he's sitting with Ben, and Ben is on to him. Ben wants him to get help. And and Ben's like, okay, you stay quiet for 5 minutes.
Yeah, don't speak as Fats for 5 minutes.
Yeah, don't. Yeah,
and he keeps on like saying like, all right. Well, how long has it been? And he's like, 20 seconds.
20 seconds.
Yeah, and I feel
I could do this all night.
Yeah.
2 minutes later, I can't do it.
That's an incredible scene. It's really, really amazing, and the fact that it's just like these two fantastic actors just like really giving it their all with a world-class director and incredible sound design and cinematography. Like, it's a powerful scene in what could easily be a just completely silly movie. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It goes, I think it goes just as far as it can.
Yeah.
In every direction it stretches itself. I think it goes just about as far as it can before it stops being entertaining. It's absurd. There are moments, there's one moment in particular that I'm thinking of that's so ridiculous and absurd, and I don't want to give it away because I loved it. I loved it because I was totally in the mood to watch that like type of movie, kind of like The Room, but like with, actually well made.
Oh, okay.
But just like having those, there were certain moments in it that where I could imagine being in a theater at a midnight showing.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, like, Ann-Margaret, what an interesting choice for this role. And she does great. She's absolutely fantastic. I think that Ed Lautner does an amazing job. I mean, like, if you don't know who Ed Lautner is, like, you Google him and take one look at his face and be like, that guy.
Yeah.
And you'll just know, like, oh, he's exactly the type of person who would work in, what is it, sheet metal or whatever it is, whatever kind of like, blue collar job out in like upstate New York or something.
Yeah.
And he's great in that position. Somebody who goes fishing on their lake that they live by.
Totally works.
Yeah.
Totally works. And has some
peaked
some
in
great
high
scenes
school
as well. What's that?
Peaked in high school.
Peaked in high school. Yeah. He's that, it makes me think of Grosse Pointe Blank, like the guy who has the BMW dealership.
Of course. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really fascinating movie that does go in all these directions, and I don't know what the intention was with it, if it was to make something that would be taken seriously or to make something that would kind of, I don't know, like cash in on the kind of horror, I don't want to say horror craze of the 70s, but it feels like a very 1970s horror film concept.
Yeah, I think that there's probably some element to that. I think that also there's something to be said about taking a subject matter like ventriloquism, which, there had been other movies about ventriloquist dummies and things like that before. But I think that it like maybe had been a while and just kind of was like, this is the right time to do this type of thing. And I think that there was also a push to like really make it feel like a serious move. And I know that like Gene Wilder wanted to play this role or like was being considered, but Richard Attenborough really wanted a more serious actor. And, this is certainly before Anthony Hopkins was the Anthony Hopkins that we know. I think Silence of the Lambs really put him on the scene in a major way. But
I mean, this is coming just a couple of years before Elephant Man.
Which was, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, that was. But I think this is the period where Hopkins was, and I I'm just either speculating and going off of some distant memory, but that I believe he was dealing with alcoholism, and that was I believe that was kind of what took him what took him like out of acting for a while. Like you don't see him in as much throughout the 80s.
Yeah.
So that might have had something to do with it. Again, I'm speculating, but I know he had
his struggles.
He
I think that he was was really great for the role. His accent threw me the entire time. Like, justify it as much as you want, but like if you want to make it seem like he actually grew up out there, then he's gonna have to Americanize the way he speaks. Because the way that Fats speaks feels American. It doesn't feel as, as foreign as, because what Anthony Hopkins, Welsh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I feel like Fats, you lose a lot of that in Fats's voice. And, but otherwise, like we're saying, it's really enjoyable. We certainly, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and say that I recommend that people watch this because it really is fascinating. We both watched it on the Canopy app, which if you have a library membership, then you're good to go. But yeah, what a fascinating movie. And like I said, Ann-Margaret is incredible. Not somebody I would have ever expected for something like this. Of course, she reunites with Burgess Meredith just a few years later in Grumpy Old Men.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Grumpy Old Men. And I don't know. I have my thoughts about kind of what our homework is on this podcast. But Dan, I'm wondering what you thought could be done with a movie like Magic.
Well, as I said before, this is a movie that I would love to see in, your midnight showings, drive-ins. This is this is a movie I would love to see people discover, and like I would love to have that in the theater experience, watching this movie and just hearing and seeing people's reactions when at various moments in the movie. So that's one direction I would go with it. I was thinking about a play. There are moments in it that do feel very, very much like they could work as a play. But then again, there's also a Burgess Meredith versus Anthony Hopkins water fight that I would just hate to lose. Not to mention, oh my God, how great is it that so the lake that this house is on up in the Catskills, the snapping turtles. I loved all that. You don't often get snapping turtles as being like the threat, but there it was. I have to can't swim. They're snapping turtles. So I love that, but I do feel like it could potentially work as a play. I think it would be interesting as a play because you would have the lines pre-recorded. I imagine you would have Fats's lines pre-recorded would
somebody in the wings with a microphone.
Well, you could. I think that actually is more fun to have somebody in the wings because then you're, you don't have the same thing every night. And it was, I think you could do some interesting things with it. I don't know if I would go as far as to say musical, but I wouldn't rule it out. We all know that there are people out there who love taking campy movies and adapting them into musicals, a la Toxic Avenger, Evil Dead.
Right.
So
right.
I could see something like this being made, but it doesn't have that cult following that those movies have.
Yeah.
So I that's what I would like to see. I don't know that there's a way to I don't know that you could really remake it. I don't know that the treatment of mental illness being taken in this manner and being used for laughs and scares. That's not gonna play as much. You would definitely need to tread lightly in that department. I could see some type of series being adapted from it. About I mean, take the novelty of a ventriloquist getting famous, but having a following this person as they try to maintain their fame, but also are struggling with this illness. And if they're afraid of losing their job, they're afraid of losing everything, but the struggle just gets harder and harder. Yeah. If there is a way to do that in a respectful and truthful manner, I'd be down with it. But yeah, no, really, I would just like if I had the money, I would just promote this and whatever, tour it around and be like, magic is coming to your town. Are you ready for Fats the dummy?
Yeah. Well, I do want to acknowledge the movies that have, come out, and I guess TV shows too, that honor the tradition of ventriloquist dummies, and whether it's horror or some sort of ventriloquist dummy having its own life kind of thing. I mean, there's the Adrian Brody movie Dummy that came out like 15 years ago, something like that.
Oh yeah.
There was that. There's the great segment in the movie The 10 with Winona Ryder where it's a vignette where she is supposed to be, she gets married to a ventriloquist, but ends up having a romantic fling with the dummy because, as we know from movies like Magic, dummies seem to always be making jokes about sex in the acts. And in the 10, oh no, that's right. In the movie, she's getting married to this guy, but ends up stealing a ventriloquist's dummy that they see on like their honeymoon, and ends up sleeping with the dummy. And it's so great the way it's done because like in the club scene, the dummy like picks her out from the crowd and makes a joke, and pardon my expression, but like about its like big wood cock. And then like after the show, she like goes backstage to like meet the ventriloquist, but actually is there to see the dummy. And then she like takes the dummy inside and she goes, "You still want to show me the big wood cock?" And it's like Winona Ryder's so good that I just absolutely like, she commits to it so hard. And anyway, I really appreciate the comedic turn that takes, where it's like this dummy does have a life of its own. And then there have of course been like shows like, I don't know, Are You Afraid of the Dark, that have of course done this kind of thing and whatever.
Sure, there's a Goosebumps.
Yeah, I think there was something in the IMDb trivia about like, the R.L. Stein's like inspiration for something with this and stuff. So wouldn't be a big shock. And but yeah, no, I feel like I would want to see a play that is I think adapted from this, but I wouldn't want it to be a horror, because when it becomes a horror, that's where things get a little, like when it goes like horror, that's where things become a little, I don't know, like goofy. And I feel like in the moments where you just have the dummy lit in a particular way and the sound in a particular way, that's something that can have great effect. If you do just have a play about a ventriloquist or magician who does ventriloquism in their act, and they maybe can only express certain things through the dummy. Because the way that I see you're holding up your finger, hold on one second, but the way that I was first seeing Fats was less of an extension of like of identity, but more of like Corky's like inner critic. the part of himself that is trying to put himself down, and that's trying to put the blame back on him for not being successful. And I thought that could have been a really interesting angle where it's not dissociative identity disorder, whereas instead it's, using this dummy as a way to reflect his own like personal demons towards himself. And I feel like there's something that could be done with that, where like you could still have something like with his agent, and maybe he does go out to the Catskills or somewhere, and he does have that like moment with his agent. This could easily be a like 2-person play where you just have like, it's really just the two of them, aside from maybe some like club scenes where it's just auxiliary people, maybe somebody introducing or, something like that. But, that scene where he's just like, I bet you can't talk just yourself for 5 minutes. Like that's one of the more impactful moments for me. And it's like, I think that there's something that could be done.
Well, that scene and the mind reading card scene between Corky and Peg, would play amazingly on stage. Horror on stage doesn't tend to work in terms of like scares. But you can definitely build up the tension and, like you said, use lighting and sound. A lot of what Attenborough does in this could be used to make a play work. No, what I was thinking of was so another thing that this brought to mind was, and I'm going to go back to my days back long ago before becoming a teacher, when I was working with a sketch comedy group and we were writing and trying to working on developing some scripts for pilots. And one of the scripts was one of the characters in one of the scripts was a ventriloquist or a puppeteer, really, because he worked on a children's TV show. He wasn't seen in it, but the whole backstory was that this character was a really gifted performer who had crippling stage fright from a traumatic experience in his high school years, and he is still a tremendous performer, but only with the puppet, which looks just like him.
Oh, okay.
And we did, what's funny, like we shot some demo scenes for it and I played that character. So we had a puppet that was made to look like me, and just reminded me of the scenes where Fats and Corky are dressed alike.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that was what we did. That was kind of what we were trying to do, but not in there was definitely something, a little off kilter about it, but not to this extent.
Right.
But it was funny. It brought me back to that. So when you said like someone who really can only communicate certain things with the use of the puppet, that's a really interesting concept. And that would be something really cool to explore with a stage play. And in fact, I have seen plays where an actor they're on stage and they're acting against a voice with a voice. And the one I'm thinking of, the voice was pre-recorded, and it was Ray Fiennes was in it. It was a one act at Lincoln Center, and I forget who the character was that he was talking to, but she was, I don't know if
was it Hobie Doyle?
Was it? Yeah, would that it were so simple. Would that it were so simple. Yes, Hobart. No, it was amazingly intense Ray Fiennes performance. So magic, ultimately, like my goal for this is just that people see it. So if you're into that type of thing, if you've listened to us talk about it, I think you know what you're getting into now. It's going to be weird and creepy and fun.
Yeah. this is one that I'm really glad that I have now seen, and so thank you for that, Dan. Yeah, it's a wild ride. It's under 2 hours, and it's got just like great performances, great everything. Some of it might be a little silly, but that's okay. And also, it's very much of its time. Yeah,
it would be a great slumber party movie.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Great slumber party movie. So yeah, if you're having a slumber party or pajama party, watch Magic.
And hey, Dan, I wanted to give a shout out to one of our Instagram followers, Yanzi. If you're listening, we just enjoyed the message that you sent about the Australianness about Australians, the pronunciation of Baz Luhrmann, which, as he says, is actually short for Barry, and it's the Australian nickname for Barry, and kind of like how for Sharon the nickname is Shaz, which is pretty cool. And he was with me with the Toni Collette thing, but argued that Ben Mendelsohn is who he thinks is the most Australian looking male actor. So I mean, I still think it's Hugo Weaving. See, the thing is, when I think of Ben Mendelsohn, I don't know. I think about some American characters. He's like, I don't know.
Well, what was the first thing you saw him in? Because that was I engaged in the back and forth in the dialogue, and for me, Hugo Weaving works because the first movie I saw Hugo Weaving in was Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
That's what I was
so Australian.
I think that it's just like it's the cheekbones especially, but the thing is, for Ben Mendelsohn, it's not the first movie that I saw him in, but it's the first thing that I that he was like, oh, I am recognizing him by name, because I've seen him in so many things without realizing who he was. But it was some HBO show that Jason Bateman did. I forget what it was called. It was a Stephen King thing.
Yeah, I forget.
But he plays like a detective or something like that, and he's American. So I think that because that was the first thing that I saw him in, where I was like associating that person with that name, that's the feeling that I get. But I've certainly seen him in a whole lot more.
The one that, and I know, leave it off, but I want to definitely recommend this because it's a good movie. First movie that I saw him in and definitely associated and was like, oh, who's that guy, was Animal Kingdom. And yes, I almost said Animal Crossing, but no, Animal Kingdom.
Animal Kingdom.
Which a great Australian crime movie.
Right.
Ben Mendelsohn, Joel Edgerton.
See, I don't know. I remember hearing about that movie. I can visualize the poster in my mind, but I haven't actually seen it. So maybe if I had seen that one, it would be a different story for me.
Who knows?
You all have a thought about who the most Australian-looking actors might be, email us, ruinchildhoodspod@gmail.com, or you can send us a message on Instagram at ruinchildhoodspod. All of our socials and all that kind of stuff is in our link tree in the show notes. So Dan, what is the next movie we are doing on this podcast?
The next movie we're doing is, I believe, our first animated feature.
That's right.
Yes. And we're going to be taking a look at 1997's Princess Mononoke.
That's right.
Yes. Directed by,
Miyazaki. I actually, I've seen a bunch of Miyazaki. I have never seen Princess Mononoke, and I'm really excited. So I'm glad that you picked that one. I think that you said maybe it's its... Wait, what year did it come out? Is it its 25th anniversary?
25th anniversary.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never seen it, and looking forward to watching it. And I'm hoping it's kind of my gateway. I haven't seen any of his movies, so
well, this is really exciting. I've certainly, seen my fair share. My Neighbor Totoro, I absolutely love. My kiddo loves Kiki's Delivery Service, which, I think that's Miyazaki. Spirited Away is absolutely fantastic. And anyway, the Studio Ghibli films are, they're truly very special, and it's really cool to be able to talk about it on our next episode after we did this weird movie.
Yeah, man.
Weird, crazy movie.
Weird, but darn if I didn't enjoy myself. So
yeah. Well, Dan, as you are taking a trip with a cabbie down memory lane, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.